Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie of Astropath Astrology. And here we are today. We're here to talk about the Cancer new moon that happens on the 17th of July. Before we get into that topic, I want you to subscribe, leave comments, share, all those good things that you want to do to help support our channel. And just to introduce you to us, Jennie is of Hidden Path Astrology. You can find her at hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find me, Laurie, at astrolore.org. One thing I want to mention is that on Etsy, and I'll have a link at the bottom, I will have available a worksheet, a little workbook for working through each new moon and each season as the sun ingresses from sign to sign. But for right now, for this video, you might want to pay attention to that Cancer new moon workbook. So is there anything else on that level of introduction that you have to say, Jennie?
Just check out my free meditations on my website. And if you want to sign up for my blog and my weekly newsletter, you can also do that on my website. So that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So here we are. It's a new moon again. It is the Cancer new moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're in that funny place again, folks, where we have a new moon at the very end of each zodiac season. And it's just, it kind of leaves this feeling of there's like a parting shot of whatever that sign represents towards the end of the season. So once again, we've been in Cancer season since the summer solstice on the 21st of June. And now we're coming up on this new moon at July 17th, and the sun is going to go into Leo on the 22nd. So just a few days later. But before we talk about that, let's just review. At a new moon, we are talking about the beginning of a new cycle that's going to last for the entire moon circuit around the planet, Earth, that is. And you're going to see that there's different phases with each of that. In this case, let's see, it's at 2:31 p.m. Eastern time, our new moon. And that's kind of like that. We always talk about this as that seed state, which is such a perfect metaphor, because you take the seed, you plant it in the soil, you can't see it for a while. And just like with the moon cycle, you can't see the moon for a little bit until it comes out as that tiny little sliver a little bit later. And then a week later, you have the first quarter moon, which is a time for action and growth. Another week later, you have the full moon. And that is when you kind of get to see the fruits of your labors of the last 2 weeks. Something shows up, it's often a time to make adjustments. And then one more week goes by and we're at the last quarter moon when you're releasing that cycle, and it goes all the way to the balsamic moon and we start again. So that's just a brief little, kind of like the hands on a clock going around in a circle.
Yeah. It's like the cycle of everything, right?
Mm-hmm, pretty much.
Birth, growth, illumination, breakdown, and death. And then we start over.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the moon is like our oldest calendar that we used to get to look up. You would look up and measure everything by it, and it's still there and it's still doing its job. So, so far. Yeah, so far. So do yourself a favor and do check out the moon cycle. Do take a look up in the sky and see if you can figure out where it is. I really like to do that. Anyway, off to, you want to talk about Cancer? What, a little more about Cancer?
One other thing before we move on is that we're planting this seed on the 17th. For the illumination of the full moon that comes on, I know I have it written down, it's August 1st.
Yeah, you got it.
Yep. That's the full moon in Aquarius. So the seed you plant now will come into full illumination on August 1st. As far as the longer cycle goes, this new moon will relate to the Cancer full moon on December 26th. So those are the two, the shorter 1 month cycle and the longer full year cycle. So then, yeah, let's talk about Cancer. What's Cancer about?
Well, I've been talking a lot about it in my blog as kind of self-care. I mean, I'm doing a little more astrology for wellness. So I've been thinking about it in those terms. But also, I don't know, sometimes there's misconceptions about self-care, what that means, that it's very selfish or self-oriented, but it's actually not. It's you dealing with your own emotions so that you can be, well, A, living a more balanced life, but B, more available for other people when they're spinning out. So the more people that are walking around that have done some form of self-care and are more aware and in tune with their own emotions, the more people there are who are going to be able to stay more balanced as things shift and move, because we're in a time, maybe you haven't noticed, but we're in a time of huge change. So the more you do this work, the better off you're going to be. And Cancer means a lot more than that too. It's the sign of the mother. So it's the idea of being able to nurture and take care of, but at the same time be very protective. So the crab is what represents Cancer, and it's really the perfect analogy because it's got that soft underbelly, so that nurturing tenderness inside, and then it has a shell so that it can walk through the world and not just get immediately decimated. So there's a balance with Cancer of the vulnerability versus the protection, and we all have to kind of work this balance. So those are a couple of things I think about.
Yeah, Cancer is an interesting sign, and I'm really glad just the way you talked about it. Yes, people can think, oh, self-care is just about taking a bubble bath. You know, it's like, yeah, there's so much more to it, and we have to care for ourselves before we're able to take care of anyone else. And I think that, you know, Cancer is often kind of diminished. People don't really understand the strength of Cancer. And what I really want to stress here is Cancer is a cardinal sign. The cardinal signs are strong. It is one of the strongest signs. And because it's a water sign, everybody thinks that it's not as strong as it is. But you think about water in its strength can, you know, cut through mountains. You know, water is not a weak element. And Cancer is a very, very strong sign. If you think about it in terms of, yeah, it's the sign of the mother. It's the sign of, and, you know, all you have to do is approach a mother bear and you know that there is no weakness when a mother is going to protect her offspring, you know, and that mother, in order to protect her offspring, has to have done her own self-care. So there's that connection. You've got to do your self-care in order to have the strength to be the protector. And I love thinking of Cancer as the protector.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you brought up I mean, it's such a strong connection to water, right? I mean, it's a water element, but just thinking about without water, there wouldn't be life on this earth, you know? So Cancer is that starting point and is responsible for propagating the species. But it really is true. And in fact, I was just hearing, you know, what they look for when they look at other planets, if they're trying to look for life, is water, is the presence of water. So it's so important and it's so potent. And also we kind of have this idea like, oh, like, you know, vulnerability, it's so weak. And it takes a hell of a lot of courage to be vulnerable in this world. And so there's a really tight connection, in my opinion, to that courageous ability to face your own emotional stuff and be vulnerable to other people and walk around. I mean, it takes a lot of chutzpah to do that. So I think the cardinality of Cancer really helps describe that. So yeah.
Great. Well, I think
Right.
that's pretty clear. Yeah, just understanding the strength of Cancer and the strength of vulnerability. It's an important thing. Okay, do we want to open up and look at the chart itself?
Yeah, let's look at it's a pretty interesting day, the actual day of the new moon. So
it is.
Okay.
Why we are against a brick wall, I'm not quite sure.
It's fine, Laurie. We won't go too much into the meaning of that.
Okay. So here is at the moment of the new moon. We are in Eastern time here. And here we have the sun and moon at 24 degrees Cancer. Pay attention if you have planets right around that 24, 25 degree of any of the cardinal signs. So that would be that would be Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Those are the cardinal signs. So if you've got planets at that tight degree, 24, 25 degrees, this is going to be extra potent for you.
Yeah, because there's a lot going on in this whole chart at around those degrees. I mean, the thing about this new moon is it's opposing Pluto, it's trining Neptune, and it's sextiling Uranus. So those are the three transpersonal planets. Where in a natal chart, you might be saying, wow, this person's really being impacted by the culture, or maybe possibly has a path where they're going to impact the culture themselves. Who knows? But at this moment in time, it's just really looking at, I mean, this is where I again go with the whole, okay, so being aware of your own emotions and knowing where they're at and working with them is going to have a profound impact on the environment around you. It's, and with these transpersonal planets, it's showing you that your personal action has even more effect at this time. Like your choice to work with your stuff is going to have a profound impact on a greater level than you could probably even imagine at this moment in time. And so planting a seed at that moment is pretty powerful, this chart. I keep thinking about that.
Yeah, it is. It's
Mhm.
really interesting how it impacts. It doesn't really impact much else, but it impacts these outer planets very, very strongly. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, like you said, Jenny, the seed you choose to plant. And I'd really encourage you to do a ritual with this. Figure out
Mhm.
where it is in your chart. Plant a seed to develop, some vulnerability, to really work with that idea of growing something in that area of your life. It
Mhm.
will impact the world around you, the way you see the world around you, and the way you're impacted by it.
Mhm.
It is a very potent moment here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think of it as kind of like, Uranus is in a sextile, so that's sort of like a little nudge towards, waking up to the changes in resources, the changes in, I mean, quite honestly, the planet around us. It's just like a little nudge. The trine to Neptune is, I know, Laurie, I love how you always talk about these as gifts. And the gift here is the reminder of recognizing that it's not just you in the boat. We're all here dealing with this together. There isn't really a way to escape changes that are happening on the collective level. But the good news is that's also like how we develop empathy, how we stay connected to compassion, and how we really see ourselves in other people. And that it makes it really accessible with that trine there that day. And then the opposition to Pluto, that I think is a bit more intense. I mean, there's something there in my mind. I just see that as like, woo, this is the stark truth is coming out. It's stark. There isn't any sugarcoating. So there's something about that. So this is just a moment in time,
Yeah.
wow.
It's like, wake up, pay attention. Yeah, that's what I think when I look at it. It's like, wake up, pay attention to that dark intensity that is changing everything. And
Mhm.
then the gift of Neptune, like you said, I think of that as kind of showing you the difference between self-care as taking a bubble bath and self-care as opening up to the collective need for this sensitivity.
Absolutely.
And then Uranus is just like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
wake up, pay attention to all of this, pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting, isn't it?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's a couple other things that I think are worthy of mentioning in this chart. Just one of them is that in a few days, um, Mars is going to oppose Saturn. It's close enough in orb here. That just brings it. Mars is now in Virgo and went into Virgo on July 10th. It just brings in this practicality, this kind of service oriented, hey, take action to be helpful. And then again, and then opposing that Saturn in Pisces, there's this insistence that you consider other people. There's an insistence on being aware of, more people than just you happening. It takes you away from any urge to be selfish and puts you right in the middle of the thick of everything, all these people. So there's a real, I like this. It kind of, it like settles things down a little bit. It makes things a little bit more grounded with that Mars
Yeah,
and Virgo.
it really does. It brings in this, the responsibility of taking action,
Mm.
the service piece of Virgo, and the compassion piece of Pisces. It's like, really taking action to be of service, coming from a very, intuitive and compassionate place.
Yeah. And so this brings in like yet another layer of, and this is why you need to do the whole self-care, dealing with your own emotions, because it allows you to be much more able to do this for people, you know? So really important piece. I like that in here.
And did you want to also mention the Mercury square Jupiter, or?
Yeah, I mean, that happens the same day. That happens the morning of the new moon. It's just a few hours before. So we were kind of talking, this is like,
don't be a jerk.
Like, yeah, totally. Like, if you're going to say something that's kind of self-centered and not just all about you, like, hold on, you know, like, think more about generosity. How can you communicate generosity and playfulness rather than me, I'm going to do me, you know?
Yeah, there is the kind of a warning about not being really
a dick.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Or just not being really dogmatic in your conversation. You know, just paying attention. Paying attention. So I think that pretty well covers it, does it?
Yeah, I think we've covered. There's other things going on this day, but you know what? Hey, we're just doing a little new moon video, so let's carry on.
Right, we could talk about it for 3 more hours, but
yeah,
we'll let that go. And all right,
okay, great.
let's move on to the individual, how it's going to impact you. And we're going to start out, those of you with, if I can get this to move. Well, oh, I know why I can't. Hold on here. All right, if you've got Aries rising, here you see that this new moon is happening in your 4th house. So, you know, you just want to think about this. Where is it that you want to be planting a seed around taking care of yourself in order to be able to protect and support others? This is landing right in your 4th house. So it's very much about your home, your family, the people that are the very closest to you. So that's an area that, you know, over this past month with the sun moving through that house, your focus has been there for a while. And here, as the sun is getting ready to move into Leo in a few days, you want to think about this and kind of plant a seed to continue that support that you've been working on in that area over this past month.
Yeah, and it brings to mind for me too, I always love how these are like two-way streets, like how it works with the signs and the houses. So the two-way street here for me is maybe you need to create a space in your house that allows you to do your self-care practices. Like I know for me, like got a little room where I can do my yoga, do my meditation. It's all set up. You know, even if it's a little closet, like create a space within your home might be also a very helpful way to use this one if you don't already. So, yeah.
Or just, you know, clean up your house, make it really, you know, there's some way in which there's a vulnerability in your home. Plant a seed to support that vulnerability and the strength of that vulnerability. Whether it be, a place in your home where you can kind of go into your own sense of understanding your own vulnerability, or, you know, supporting someone in your home. You know, maybe you're caring for someone in your home. Plant a seed to extend that care to yourself and all of your home and family.
Yeah, I mean, the word refuge comes to mind. Like there's something about refuge. And so you got to create that, but also it supports you. Like when, you know, so there's that double action in both directions. So cool.
All right. So let's go on to those of you who have Taurus rising.
The Taurus rising, this really brings the focus onto something to do with your communication. So whether that's, I mean, I always think about like checking in with your internal narrative. Is it nurturing to you? Is it supporting you? That might be one of the first things to think about. And then that also comes out in how you communicate with others, is being able to communicate this kind of caring, nurturing tone. The 3rd house is funny because it talks about those really close connections like siblings, but it means that in the sense that they might be someone you connect with on the daily, because it also means, you know, the cashier and the postal worker and the people that you see on the regular. So there's a funny thing here. Yeah, you know, it's like this funny, like, okay, so be willing to be vulnerable with like these people you don't really know on a funny level. I mean, it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it is.
Hmm.
I like that. As you said that, I thought, well, wouldn't this be nice? Somebody with Taurus rising to, kind of take this to heart. And when they go into the grocery store or wherever, just to actually, ask somebody, how are you? With a real intention of being available, being themselves vulnerable for that kind of connection. This could very much just be about, yeah, planting a seed to be vulnerable in that space.
Hmm. Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's fun to think about, isn't it? Because I
Yeah.
don't know, you never know when you might get into a really deep conversation you never even expected. That's what kind of made me think of, and be open to that, and
Right.
even, like you said, go be willing to go a little deeper and
Yeah.
cultivate it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So planting a seed for the vulnerability of your communications and or the vulnerability of those relationships. Maybe there's a neighbor that you've never really connected with. And at this point, you realize they need something that you can provide. Pay attention to those things. Look at your neighbors. Do they need something that you could offer easily? There might be something in that. People are funny how they just, kind of shut themselves in their own spaces and don't look beyond. And our neighbors might
mm,
need help.
hmm,
Okay,
great point.
let's
Nice.
move on to those with Gemini rising. This puts this Cancer new moon in your second house. So we're going to think about this as planting a seed for the development of caring for your own understanding of self-worth. This may have something to do with money, resources, how, what's your level of vulnerability with how you spend or make money and how that supports your self-worth.
Mhm.
There's some vulnerability in that you want to develop in a way that is strong and supportive of your self-worth and how you can use that as I think I'm rambling, but to use your self-worth and your resources to support others.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're rambling. I think what you're actually making me think of is, the second house is kind of a funny house because it's not one, in the ancient way of looking at astrology, you can't really, the second house can't really see the first house. Like it's sort of hidden in a way. And what I'm getting at is like, this is not very easy to kind of have to dig into the vulnerability that is underlaying your self-worth because it comes out in funny ways. It comes out in like this low self-esteem, or it might come out in a, like negative self-talk with Gemini rising. There's different ways that it might come out. But it's not very easy to get at. And so you kind of have an opportunity at this new moon to, I don't know. It's like it's planting the seed in the dark, so you
Yeah.
can't quite see, but that it's going to come to fruition, and it's going to, as you say, totally impact your resources and your finances, your ability to be available for others. But
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the easiest
No,
task,
it's not.
you
And
know.
when I'm thinking about like practical ways that this could be, could show up in somebody's life, like, think about it. Does your income support your self-worth? Do you need to, maybe planting the seed is going to your boss and asking for a raise or raising your
Mhm,
rates, really understanding your worth
mhm.
and supporting that.
Oh yeah, I like the way you put that, right? Because it could be easy to be, I don't know, being kind of pushed down in a way where you, yeah, like you should be asking for a raise, like what you just
Well,
said,
yeah, I mean, I
Interesting.
thought of this
Hmm.
specifically. I was thinking about it with someone I know that has this setup that, there's a real difficulty for this person to accept being paid for a job.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
that it made me think of that the way you were talking about. It's kind of a hard area. I think with Gemini rising, this is a difficult area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really brings in, yeah, I mean, this is just an area of vulnerability. And
Yeah.
so it's just, and it really ties in with, yeah, the resources you have to other people. So I think it'd be easy to have some struggles around it and not be getting what you really are worth, or not being able to advocate for yourself. So this is a great time to really work with that
Advocate
piece.
for
Yeah.
yourself on that level. And, you know, if you want to think about it in those super practical terms, if you're not getting paid what you're worth, you can't use your resources to support others. You know,
Yeah.
so there's all of that. That's an interesting one. I like
Mhm.
that. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to those of you with Cancer rising.
So Cancer rising, that brings this whole new moon business right into your first house. So this is, I always think the first house, it kind of reveals a very deep thing about you, which is your life path and your overall direction, being a Cancer type direction where you're protecting and nurturing other people. And it's also a little bit about that self-image that you portray. So you kind of put off this image of being this person is able to be nurturing and protective of other, whether you feel like you are or not. So that's something to work with. So I just think it's a really important time to work with, on the most basic level, how are you looking out for yourself emotionally? How are you feeling? Developing a habit of sort of saying, how am I feeling right now? And if things are not awesome, like, what do I need right now? What can I do right now in this moment? Take a deep breath, feel your feet pressing against the floor. I mean, really, really simple, basic things that can help you navigate this. Because with Cancer rising, there's a big sensitivity. You're walking around the world with a lot of sensitivity and your vulnerability right on your sleeve. And so it is of crucial importance that you learn the dance between the vulnerability and when to be fully vulnerable, and then the protection, so that you don't get crushed, by the intensities of life. So this is an extra important time for those of you with Cancer rising.
Yeah, so you're planting a seed to, I was, as you were talking about, I was thinking about the seed being planted in that first house, really understanding the strength part of it,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
not getting kind of sucked under into the incredible sensitivity. Underneath that sensitivity and within that vulnerability is that strength. So you're planting a seed to really understand your own the strength and power within your vulnerability.
Nice.
So showing up with your heart on your sleeve is not a weak position unless you don't pay attention to who's in your environment. I mean, you can't always show up with your heart on your sleeve, because there are situations that would be dangerous. But when you're in a situation where you can, really understanding that ability is a position of strength.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, I was thinking about this moment of time, as we talked about in the beginning, with all these transpersonal planets contacting this. I mean, this is a little bit like Cancer rising is those with Cancer rising or with a Cancer emphasis, it's part of your job essentially to kind of show the way with dealing with your own emotional layers and content, and just being as aware and in relationship with your emotional self is like kind of where we need to go as a species. So there really is this is kind of like, the more you can work with your emotions, you are kind of leading the way, and encouraging other people to do it. So it's an important moment, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's move on, and we'll go to those with Leo rising.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you've got Leo rising, this new moon is falling in your 12th house. That's an interesting area of life to have this vulnerability and this sensitivity. And we can think of it from different perspectives. We can think of that 12th house as being our spirituality. We can think of it as our unconscious internal patterns, but there's some area in there that the sun's been moving through this area for this whole Cancer season, so you've been really aware of that internal voice probably more than usual. And now, before the sun moves into Leo, bringing its attention right into front and center for you, you've got this opportunity to plant a seed to really take care of what you've maybe uncovered in this past month in terms of your own internal nature. What have you been looking at? What have you been paying attention to? What's the internal voice that you've been feeling behind the scenes? Open, you know, so you're planting a seed to open that internal door. Jenny and I have a friend who talks about the 12th house as, you know, a place where there's a door behind our heads that we can open and let information in from other realms. So this is planting a seed to allow that door to open, maybe. What do you think, Jen?
Well, I think this is interesting how it's the 12th in the first house. And then we're talking about Cancer and Leo. So we're talking about things to do with the moon and things to do with the sun. So in a lot of ways, like with Leo rising, it's like you're kind of bridging that gap between the hardest to understand, like most collective, the collective unconsciousness, like this ocean of consciousness, all these really big concepts. And then you have Leo in the first house. So it's like, how do you as an individual in this first house fit in with this like collective, these massive ideas of the collective unconscious? So it's a pretty like, wow. I mean, just in terms of understanding the 12th and the first house together and how they can work together. So I just think this is a very there's a lot of potency here. And to have that, you know, like, for lack of a better word, spirituality. I know it's sort of a cliche, but it's just how you view the world, how you feel connected to the much bigger picture. And I see this as being particularly poignant at this time. And that, again, there's that whole, okay, so when you do that work, you're so much more available for other people who need support, who have not been able to do this work, who are, or who have, you know, much more difficult circumstances or whatever it is. It just makes you available. So it's super worthwhile. And this is pretty powerful for Leo rising.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, let's move on to Virgo rising.
Oh, Virgo rising. I feel like with Virgo rising, this is a really important time to ask yourself how receptive you're able to be to the community that supports you. You know, there's a whole thing about planting a seed to allow in the support of those around you who really support and value your work. You know, so this is the community, your cohorts. This could be a variety of things, but it's not the super personal relationships. It's more like, as a whole, the people who support you in this life. So there's something connected to like how you take care of yourself and your ability to allow others to support you, because that's where that vulnerability is going to be. Like, can you be open and able to accept that?
Yeah, for people with Virgo rising, that area of community, that area of receiving support from others is a place where they feel very vulnerable. So kind of, planting a seed to accept that vulnerability, find that community, plant a seed to increase your ability to open yourself to that vulnerability and understand the strength that you get from opening to that vulnerability. That's the seed that you want to plant. There is some opening in that area that you want to really pay attention to at this time.
I see that it's tricky because Cancer is so personal, and it's like your deep inner emotional content and these other things, and it's so personal and so vulnerable. And like the 11th house it's pretty impersonal. You know, it's broad strokes, you know, but at the same time, you know, this is where you get elevated as an individual, like where your community says, hey, we need you and you're an important part of us, you know, and you kind of get lifted into this collective space. And but I understand why it's tricky, because that it's just not very personal in that 11th house. It could feel extra vulnerable right when you're trying to be vulnerable in a good way, you know. So
it's an interesting one for sure. Okay, are we ready?
Yeah.
I could clamor on about it, but I'm gonna slow down here and just go on to the next one. So we're moving on to those with Libra rising. So this puts the new moon in the 10th house. So you want to think about your, issues of sensitivity, vulnerability, nurturing regarding your career, your vocation, how you really show up in the world, planting a seed. Since it's the new moon, we want to think about planting a seed. You want to plant a seed to kind of work with that, caring for yourself in that area. Are you, really take a moment to look at your career, how you are in that space, how you're supported there, how you're supporting others there. And plant a seed to grow that area. Over the past month, there's been, the sun's been moving through there, and you've been kind of focused probably in certain ways on your career. Before the sun moves out of there, you've got this opportunity to plant a seed to continue that development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems too like with, Libra rising, there's something about caring for others in your profession. And I think it's a good time to ask the question, how does the idea of vulnerability tie into what I do for work and how people see me? Like kind of asking that question and getting into that question for yourself. And then whatever that is, it's like planting the seed, as you're saying, Laurie, just to continue to cultivate that vulnerability in whichever, whether that's taking care of other people, as you've mentioned, or feeling like you're able to be taken care of within your workplace. I mean, again, it's always that two-way street of like, in which way does it work? And each person who's listening to this is going to be something slightly different. So evaluate for yourself how that works, that concept of vulnerability in your profession.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that. I've had so many clients with Libra rising that tend to be in the medical field or childcare. It's really pretty interesting how that works. But at this time, really planting a seed to really create an ongoing sense of who you are in that nurturing capacity and how you present that into the world.
Yeah, and for some reason, right, me saying that, I was like, and what are your convictions? Because there's something about your deep emotional needs that are very impactful in this part of your life. So something about, this came to my mind. So great.
Okay, so let's move on to those with Scorpio rising.
So Scorpio rising, that new moon in Cancer is happening in your 9th house. The 9th house is your worldview, your perspective. It's kind of the experiences that help you develop that worldview. So this is a really important time to make sure that you are, I mean, quite simply, like taking care of yourself in this area of life. So this might mean that you're ready to take on some kind of new learning, but on an emotional level. Like maybe you've discovered, I just listened to this podcast about being emotionally immature and what that means and what it looks like. And then, and all of us have some elements of that. So it's interesting to think about, like, what do you feel like in your evaluation of yourself that there's some place you can grow and learn? And I hope that you say the answer is yes, because everybody living on the planet needs to continue to learn and grow. But with someone Scorpio rising, this is like kind of bringing your own emotional stuff into a course of study, so it kind of gives you this little layer of perhaps objectivity as you look at that. But so think about that. Think about planting a seed to do with your worldview and your vulnerability.
Yeah, and there's many different ways you could plant that seed. And we want to remember too that this is about planting a seed. It's not, like, okay, the new moon is in the 9th house, so I have to be studying something new tomorrow. No. You plant a seed. Like you think about, what's my interest in terms of opening my mind to the bigger picture, my worldview. That could be just, exploring some new idea that might lead to a new study. It might be exploring an idea of somewhere that you could travel that would open your mind in some new way. Learning something that is deeply personal and holds in it some vulnerability for you, because expanding your worldview is a vulnerable place for you with Cancer rising. So accepting that, understanding it, and understanding the strength in that. There's some vulnerability. It's not necessarily an easy place. But there's a lot of strength in it. So considering what is that tiny seed that you want to plant in that area.
Yeah. I was kind of, as you're talking, I was thinking about that whole concept of kind of having to empty yourself out. So the purpose of doing the kind of emotional work is so that you can be more receptive, and the more receptive you are, the more you can expand your mind, your worldview, your perspective. So there's definitely a very tight connection there with dealing with your vulnerability so that you can be receptive, or more receptive to the things that you want to learn. And then I see it as being incredibly fruitful and interesting to you, to have the emotional part of it in place. So, yeah.
Well, that's pretty exciting.
Cool.
I like that. For Scorpio rising, just think about it as time to plant a seed for travel or education or connecting with cultural ideas, just things that open your mind. So go with that. That's lovely. Okay, next we're going to move on to those of you with Sagittarius rising. This brings this Cancer new moon right into your 8th house. So for this past month, the sun's been moving through this area. Your attention in some way has been on this area. The 8th house is really, it's where we bump into the baggage of other people. It's the area of deep, intense, shared values, shared issues, and issues that we connect with others on. It's also, it's where you have to set boundaries. With Cancer here, this is not an easy area. It's an area where you feel vulnerable, and underneath that vulnerability, remember, there's a lot of strength. So you want to be planting a seed regarding how you navigate other people's baggage, or how you navigate your own ability to develop and hold boundaries.
Nice.
And you always want to remind people, when it comes to boundaries, it's not what somebody else is going to do. It's what you're going to do in the face of other people.
Yeah. Well put.
I think that's really important to think about.
Yeah. With Sagittarius rising, you're right. Laurie, this is not a very easy place. But I also think it kind of elevates, it really puts the focus on your need to understand your emotional world. You have to, because you have to know yourself well enough to understand where you need to put those boundaries. You have to understand, okay, I kind of end here and the other person begins here. And it's not clear cut, because this is a watery realm of boundaries that kind of move and shift, and they're not barriers. They are meant to be boundaries. So there is some permeableness to them, and it's a tricky art, a lifelong pursuit. But I also think with Sagittarius rising, once you kind of get more tuned into your emotions, then they're going to give you all the information you need really quickly. If you have that kind of healthy relationship, because when you get that intense feeling, right away, ooh, this is a trigger for me, and that allows you to kind of recognize it, which is, maybe even half the battle, or maybe even more, of knowing, okay, I need to just take a deep breath here, and then there's a boundary that needs to go here, or I need to remove myself in the room for this moment. But you don't have to rush. You just kind of go, oh, all right, because you have that self-awareness. So there's something really worthwhile about really getting to know yourself, so you can do this skill well. I imagine there's probably quite a few therapists out there with Sagittarius rising.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. So planting a seed in that area. And, one of the things with the 8th house too, is just the value of ritual. So doing a ritual with this seed planting is, I think it's great for everybody to do that. But particularly if you've got Sagittarius rising, really paying attention to that.
Nice.
All right. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Moving on to Capricorn rising.
So those of you with Capricorn rising, the focus of self-care has to do with your partnerships. I mean, in a nutshell, this is how you take care of your needs while you're in partnership with someone else. And what that does is it creates a huge balancing effect in the relationship, rather than expecting somebody else to meet your needs, you know, your deep inner needs. You're doing that. Even from having this conversation, it's like, this is not an easy, clear-cut task. This is something that you're working with in relationships at all times. I mean, there's always going to be a note of this. Because if you think about it, there's you, there's the other person, and then there's sort of this like third entity that is the relationship itself. So there's a lot of confusion in here about, well, how do I take care of me? Or am I taking care of the other person? Or am I taking care of the relationship? And there is a need, especially with Capricorn rising, to kind of tease those apart. And as best you can, like, be able to recognize for yourself, like, what are the things that you need to do for yourself so that you can be a really good partner, so you can show up as a good partner. So there's something in here about planting a seed to kind of renew, refresh those ideas, like how you take care of yourself while you're in your one-on-one partnerships.
Yeah. That's interesting to think about that. Capricorn is so self-sufficient and strong, and Cancer clearly is just as strong. They're both cardinal signs, but it looks so different, the earth to the water. And it's always interesting to me, somebody with a Capricorn rising that has that sensitivity when it comes to a relationship. And it's just an interesting thing to see. I can think of a handful of people who have that setup, and it's just so interesting because they come across as so strong and powerful, but in their relationship, there's just such a tenderness that you see that you wouldn't necessarily expect. But planting a seed there and really understanding that your vulnerability toward your partner is so much of your strength.
Nice. Yeah, I like the way you put that. That was really good, because
it's such an interesting combination to me, that Capricorn to Cancer. I really like that.
Yeah, because it's such a strong desire for connection. I know we were talking in the beginning of how self-care and so on has to do with connection, and it's like, well, yes, so like really needing that connection, even though, as you said, they show up as this kind of serious person who's like, I don't need anything,
right?
But nothing could be further from the truth. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's move on to those with Aquarius rising. That puts the Cancer new moon in your 6th house. So this 6th house area is really about, day-to-day routines of self-care, of caring for your physicality, your dietary needs, your exercise needs, how you take care of your pets, as you go through your life. What are your patterns of how you take care of yourself? So it's an area where you're vulnerable. It may not be an area that's really easy for you because there's a lot of sensitivity in there. People with Aquarius, this is funny. I have seen I don't know, a handful, a half a handful, 2 handfuls of clients over the years with Aquarius rising that have extreme attachments to their pets. And I always think that's that Cancer in that 6th house, that just sensitive vulnerability toward whatever it is they take care of on that day-to-day routine level. So it is such a place of sensitivity. And that's where you want to plant a seed. Maybe you're planting a seed for a new dietary regime. Maybe you're planting a seed. Maybe you're going to get a new kitten. There's something vulnerable in there that you want to open the door to at this point in time.
Yeah, I think I love thinking about the pets here. It's really sweet. But a funny thing about Aquarius rising is I think that, of course, depending to some degree on your natal chart, but when you show up as an Aquarius rising, it's like people tend to think you're this like visionary, like that can be very like hard to read perhaps, and not a super emotional person necessarily, again, depending on certain things. And I kind of think the secret superpower of the Aquarius rising is the daily habits of being, where the vulnerability comes in, and like the daily self-care on this like level of like looking after emotions, making sure you feel nourished. Those kinds of things can really, I don't know, had this image of the hidden superpower of what allows you to show up as an Aquarius rising person with that very sort of visionary, futuristic intellect focus. So I like that. And I kind of think of the sixth house as like the self-care place anyway. It's how you eat, how you get ready for work, how, do you exercise in the morning after, or, how do you do all those pieces? Do you meditate? All those kinds of little things come into play here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, I think we're ready to move on.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so now those of you with Pisces rising.
Well, Pisces rising, there's just an inextricable connection between your need to take care of yourself or to utilize your emotions into your creative pursuits. I mean, you've got to have some kind of creative outlet with Pisces rising, I think, because, no matter what your whole situation is, this is very, very important for the health of your emotions represented by your moon. Is going to be how you do creative pursuits. So the Cancer new moon is a wonderful time to refresh that, plant a seed to like, what is the thing that you just love to do, that you give of yourself generously, that you just kind of get lost in when you do it. And it can be an art thing, or it can be something you're doing with your children. That's a possibility. It also might be that you have some spicy love affair going on in your life right now. And this is a really good time to just really enjoy that and feel filled up by it emotionally. Oh.
Yeah, the fifth house, I love the fifth house. I mean, who doesn't love the fifth house, right? It's about how we give of ourselves most freely, and to have that sign of strength and vulnerability in that house. It's so important that you do have some way, some area where you really give freely of yourself. So you're going to plant a seed for that at this point in time and see how that grows. The sun's been moving through that area for the month. So your attention has been there. Maybe you're working on a lovely creative project, or like Jenny said, maybe you've got some hot, spicy love affair. And hot, spicy love affairs are very tender places for you. They might be less hot and spicy and more just cuddly and tender and sweet. Not that there can't be hot spiciness in that as well, but with Cancer there, the tender vulnerability has to be part of how you give of yourself, and that's what you're planting a seed for now. Lovely. All right, Jenny, I think we have gone through our 12 signs, and we've talked about the stuff.
All right. I think this is great. Thank you for watching, everybody. And we'll see you for the Leo season video next.
Yes, very soon. Okay, thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.